In the neat children's book version of Noah's Ark, the picture is simple. 8 humans, a floating zoo, clean animals on the right, unclean on the left, rainbow incoming. The Midrashic version is not that clean. Rashi, commenting on of every living thing of all flesh, General 6:19, quotes a tradition that even demons, afilu shedim, boarded the ark. Genesis Rabbah goes further. Noah took demons into the ark and thus preserved their species. In other words, the flood that wiped out almost everything still carried the shedim through. God's reset of the world includes not only lions and doves, but also whatever the shedim are. So what does it mean to imagine Shaitan riding out the storm alongside Noah? This is where it gets interesting. What are Shedim doing anywhere, let alone on a rescue vessel? Jewish sources are messy and non-uniform about Shedim. Depending on where you look, they are spiritual offshoots of Adam and Lilith, half-corporeal beings who eat and reproduce but are invisible, or symbolic language for the dangerous zones of the world. Deserts, ruins, borders, night. What they never are is neutral. Shedim sit at the seam between order and chaos. They mark places where human beings are fragile, dark roads, lonely hillsides, emotional thresholds. So when the Midrash says that Noah brought Shedim on board, it is not just adding a spooky detail. It's saying, whatever is fundamentally risky and uncanny about the world is not being erased by this flood. The ark is not a sanitized terrarium. It's a compressed world. If the post-flood earth will still have temptation, terror, and mischief, then some representation of that has to be on the boat. Even demons, the logic of inclusion. Rashi's remark hangs on a textual nuance. Torah distinguishes between all flesh and all living beings. He reads that broader phrase as expanding the manifest cargo list to include non-fleshly beings such as Shedim. That's already a theological punchline. The flood is not a selective exorcism. God's preservation is wider than our comfort. We might have written the story with a cleaner ark, wipe the slate, delete every parasite, every predator, every demon. Start fresh with a world of gentle herbivores and emotionally healthy people. But the tradition insists, no, even demons go on the ark. That means the new world is going to be morally ambiguous from day one. The possibility of deceit, addiction, cruelty, and spiritual danger is baked into the post-diluvian order. The flood solves something, but it does not solve everything. God seems less interested in running a fantasy world and more interested in preserving a real one. And a real world includes the capacity to go very wrong. The demon of deceit and the demon of loss. One later Midrashic line quoted in Parsha anthologies and popular essays imagines a particular scene. The demon of deceit, Shikra, wants to board the ark. Noah tells him, everything must come in pairs. Where is your mate? Deceit goes and finds the demon of loss, Pakta, persuading him to pair up so they can survive. That pairing is pure moral geometry. Deceit never arrives alone. Where there is deception, loss follows. When deceit sneaks onto the ark, it has to bring its natural consort, the losses that trail behind lies, trust lost, property lost, time lost, self-respect lost. Post-flood existence will not be shielded from that equation. The Shaitan aboard Noah's Ark are not just random bogeymen, they are codified consequences. The Midrash links spiritual forces to moral patterns. It is mapping how the world will still work after the waters recede. Demons as species God refuses to abandon. Genesis Rabbah's line is surprisingly tender. Noah took demons into the ark and thus preserved their species. That phrase, their species, puts Shedim in the same category as birds and beasts. Not morally, but ontologically, they are a kind of creature that exists in God's world, and the flood is about preserving kinds, not annihilating everything that makes us uncomfortable. You can read this 2 ways. God's compassion is so broad that it even extends in some strange way to destructive beings. The Creator does not casually erase what has been made, even if its role is hard to love. 2. This is less about compassion for demons and more about respect for structure. The world has to contain friction, hazard, and resistance, or else human freedom collapses into scripted performance. If there are no real wrong paths, right paths become meaningless. Either way, the point stands. The Ark is not a utopia bubble. It is a seed pod of a complex ecology, including entities that will later oppose, tempt, and frighten the very humans their survival made possible. That's uncomfortable. It also tracks with experience. No catastrophe, however severe, ever manages to wash the darkness out of human potential. After every never again, the same pattern reemerges in new clothes. The Shadin survived the last flood. They will be present for the next moral test. Ark is containment, not cure. Notice where the Shadin are, on the Ark, not running it. They are passengers, not captains, cargo, not architects. The narrative never hands them the wheel. That distinction is crucial. The flood does not eliminate danger or fully purify the human heart. What it does is limit, confine, delay, and recontextualize. The Ark is a floating structure of containment, violent waters outside, controlled chaos inside. Animals that would normally rip each other apart live side by side under a higher discipline. Human appetites are curtailed. Cohabitation is forbidden until landfall. The Shadin fit that pattern. Their presence signals that destructive potentials are still real, but for now they are boxed in. The moral world after the flood will be about learning how to live with these passengers without handing them command. Modern translation: when a life falls apart and is rebuilt, through recovery, therapy, spiritual work, the goal is not to become a creature incapable of rage, addiction, deceit, despair. The goal is to keep those forces on board, acknowledged but not in charge. Noah's Ark, with Shadim in some shadowed corner, is that picture. Shamdan in the vineyard, post-flood collaboration with darkness. Another tradition in Genesis Rabbah, a demon named Shamdan went with Noah to plant the vineyard and made a condition with him not to interfere with his work or he would injure him. This scene comes just after the flood, when Noah plants a vineyard, drinks, and falls into a compromised, shamed state. Wine here is double-edged, sacramental potential on one side, catastrophe on the other. Why bring in a demon as co-worker in that moment? Because anything that carries that much ambivalence, like wine, like power, like sexuality, like technology, always has a Shadin dimension. Noah is not just planting grapes, he is opening a door to intoxication, vulnerability, and shame. Shamdan's condition is a warning. You can collaborate with volatile forces, but you cannot pretend to control them absolutely. If you interfere with their nature, if you ignore their danger, they will injure you. The Shadin that came through the flood now stand beside Noah as he reshapes the world. Their presence marks the places where human projects intersect with danger. They are not just cartoon devils, they are commentary on human overconfidence. Psychological reading, the Shadin we smuggle into survival. Read psychologically. The Midrash is brutally honest. When a human being goes through a flood, illness, war, addiction, divorce, any devastation, and somehow survives, they do not emerge demon-free. The same internal Shadin that helped wreck the old life often make it onto the lifeboat. The impulse to lie to avoid shame, the hunger for numbing, the reflex to control or disappear, the patterns of panic and self-sabotage. You don't get to say, only the good parts of me survived. That's not how psyche works. The Midrash about Shadin on the Ark is effectively saying, be under no illusion. When the world restarts, everything in you restarts as well, light and shadow both. You will rebuild with your demons on board. That recognition is not pessimism, it's sobriety. The alternative is spiritual fantasy, imagining that one grand crisis will permanently fix what is wrong in us. It doesn't. It never has. The flood was the biggest crisis in mythic memory, and even there the Shaden have tickets. God, responsibility, and a non-sanitized world. So what kind of God preserves Shaden? Not a God obsessed with tidy optics, not a deity running a universe of porcelain dolls. The God of this midrash is willing to keep danger on the table, keep moral risk alive, keep the capacity for horror in play, and then call human beings into covenant anyway. The responsibility shifts. If God is not going to run a safe, padded world with no demons, then we are responsible for how we relate to what rides the wind with us. Containing impulses instead of denying them, refusing to make covenants with deceit even when it promises survival, remembering that wherever deceit is given birth, loss is already packing its bags. Noah doesn't get to protest, "I didn't ask for demons." He brought them, or God insisted they come. Either way, the reality is, the ark is shared space. The world is shared space. Our inner life is shared space. No amount of piety will evict the Shaden entirely. It will only change who runs the deck. The Shaden is permanent fellow travelers. Imagine the ark in the worst of the storm, wood groaning, animals crying, rain hammering like nails. Somewhere in the less lit corridors, shapes we don't quite see moving, shading preserved species of spiritual hazard, biding their time. That's not horror movie decoration. That's a statement. The new world is not naive. The new covenant is not for the innocent only. The moral drama after the flood includes real antagonists, inner and outer. The essay version of that midrash is simple and unsentimental. A world without Shaden would be a world without tragedy, but also without real freedom. A story where Noah sails with only cuddly animals would be a lie about what survival actually looks like. The God who saves even demons forces humanity to grow up, stop dreaming of a clean slate, start learning how to live with what the slate actually holds. So the shading that accompanied Noah on the ark are not a footnote. They are the confession that no flood, no ritual, no miracle erases the possibility of darkness. The task is not to wish them out of existence, but to keep them as cargo, not captain, and to remember, every time deceit comes asking for a berth, that loss is never far behind, already asking where it should store its luggage.